Hi, I'm Karen Purcell, more commonly known in fandom as Dr. Karen, but I'm here as an interviewer. I'd like to introduce our author guest of honor, Nancy Kress. Nancy was born in upstate New York, not too far from where I was born. She had a normal childhood, went to college to become a fourth grade teacher. She left teaching to raise her children and started writing to the great benefit of us, her readers. Since her first short story was published in the 70s, she has produced hundreds of short stories and many excellent novels. On the way, her talent has been recognized. She has received 2 Hugos, 6 Nebulas, the Theodore Sturgeon Award for Short Story, and the John W. Campbell Award for Best Science Fiction Novel, the last 2 of which are awarded by the Center for the Study of Science Fiction at the University of Kansas. These days, she is living and writing in Seattle, Washington. And my first question is, are you currently working on anything in particular as far as writing goes?
Your first question is going to make me sound very lazy because right now I'm in a sort of fallow period. I finished a couple things and now I'm kind of taking the summer off to regroup and rethink and fill the well up again.
Well, that doesn't sound lazy to me at all. That sounds like you're doing good self-care and making sure that you get yourself replenished with energy so that you can give us the next great novel. So more power to you.
Well, there are writers that have lots of ideas, and I'm not one of those writers. I have to kind of wait until an idea really grabs me, and then I work on it. I jot down ideas, or rather ideas for ideas, continuously. But when I look at a couple, most of them a few weeks later, they don't grab me. So I'm waiting now for the next thing to really grab me. And to do that, I do a lot of reading in various different areas. I do a lot of walking and thinking. And since during the pandemic, I went nowhere for a year and a half, I'm starting to see people. I traveled east to visit my children. And it sort of looks like normal life in that writing is not exactly a normal life. So this looks more like normal life, at least for the moment.
Excellent. What was your last published novel? I think you said 2020 was the last one that came out.
Yes, 2 things came out in 2020. There was a novel from Bain, a space opera called The 11th Gate, and there was also a standalone novella from Tachyon called Sea Change, which is about the uses and misuses and applications and misapplications of genetically grown crops. Always a volatile subject.
But also a very interesting one.
And I think an absolute necessary one. I write about genetic engineering a lot because this is where the future is. This is coming. This is actually here. It's not coming, it's already here. And I really think that people have a lot of wrong ideas about it.
I completely agree. As a veterinarian, I started learning about genetic engineering before I went into graduate school. So it's always been of interest of mine. And I really like seeing the hard questions addressed in science fiction, which is one of the reasons I like your work.
Well, thank you, Karen.
So since you were talking about reading things to get ideas, what are you currently reading that maybe you want to talk about?
Well, I belong to a science fiction book club, and about every few months we read a science-based book, and then we discuss it and argue about it. And some of them are very science-based. For instance, we read Spooky Action at a Distance about quantum entanglement. That one was a little bit tough going. And we read Braiding Sweetgrass about a Native American approach to conservation and to the environment and to the uses of crops, which was a softer approach. But since she was an ecologist, it was interesting too. Right now, we're reading a very controversial book. It's called Unsettled. And it's by a person who was an advisor to the Obama administration. And before that, he worked for BP in their renewable energy. So this is kind of a mixed thing to go from working for an oil company as an advisor to working for the Obama administration as an advisor on climate change. But the book, which I'm only about a third of the way through, is controversial because he thinks that we are being alarmist not because there isn't anything to be alarmed about, but because the media is taking and exaggerating what there is to be alarmed about in a way that the real science is getting lost. I'm not far enough in to know if this is actually true, but so far the book has done a very good job of setting up very careful definitions of what are the parameters of various models, what is the level of confidence, what does level of confidence mean, and what does margin of error mean, and what are they for various different kinds of measurements. So it's interesting to somebody like me who does not have a science background. And I don't know how the group will take it. We have a range of political opinions in my science book club. And since you can't separate climate change from politics, it should be a really interesting meeting.
Oh, I expect it will. Climate change is a volatile subject, no matter how many people are in your group and for what reason. So I think you guys are going to have fun with that one, but it might get a little heated.
Like genetic engineering, also a volatile subject.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So we have some questions from folks who are coming to the convention. I had posted about this to Facebook and some folks got back to me. So from David Hook, he would like to know, how do you balance continuing characters in a series versus new ones?
Oh, the series is always difficult. And before I get to the balancing characters, which is an interesting topic, the major problem with writing a series, and I've committed trilogy 4 times, I never intended to, but I did, is how do you get all that backstory in? And of course, that involves the continuing characters, because the longer the series goes on, the more backstory there is, obviously. And it can be incomprehensible if you're on the 5th book of a series and you haven't read the first 4 to understand why character X is doing what he's doing to character Y and why character Y does or does not resent it. So that's a big problem. And once you've got that under control, then you have to introduce new characters as well. And I think a usual rule of thumb would be to start with the old characters in the first chapter or so that the reader has something that they're familiar with under their feet. And then introduce the new characters, not in a huge lump if you can avoid it, but a couple or one at a time, or even one at a time. And be very clear about their relationship to the old characters, if they have any. Because that way there's something that the reader can integrate these things into.
That makes a lot of sense, rather than hit them all at once with something new. And I've seen both approaches, and I much prefer the gradual ones. I think that I accept them better as being part of the book.
Well, that's what we want. We want you to accept them. So that's the aim.
All right, from Nem Plum, what's your advice on how to remain sane and healthy in the pandemic? A little off topic from books, but I found books to be very helpful during the pandemic. So I thought you might have some author insights.
Assuming that I did stay sane during the pandemic, and therefore I have something to say. The pandemic was easier on those of us that are natural introverts. I think, I really do. When you're used to spending a lot of time alone, in your own head or with books or online, the pandemic produced some wrenching shifts. For instance, I didn't see my children for 1.5 years because my grown kids are back east. But it also was easier. For extroverts, it was much more difficult. I know from my friends that are. They established bubbles of people that they could go and that they could see. And as soon as they could break the bonds of being confined, and in some cases sooner than that, they were out there. But I think the main thing that anyone can do is tell yourself that this is temporary. You don't have to live like this forever. And of course, the big thing is get vaccinated. Get vaccinated so that you can get out there again and you're not at risk. I admit to being very uneasy, despite trying to understand why people don't get vaccinated. I'm finding it very, very difficult.
As a medical professional, I just don't understand it at all. But then I have been so steeped in why vaccines work and the statistics behind when we didn't have vaccines. especially in my patients, that it's very hard for me to understand. But I agree, get vaccinated, and that's the best way. And I'm an extrovert, so I was up to see my folks as soon as the whole family was vaccinated.
The polio vaccine came out, I think, and somebody will correct me if I'm wrong, in 1954. And I think 2 days after it came out, my mother had all 4 of us children. I was the oldest by the hand down there to get the vaccine. She had seen what it could do, what polio could do to people. And I can remember once in the summer coming home, it must have been, since I was only 6, it must have been before then, saying my neck hurt. And my mother immediately put me in their bedroom, my parents' bedroom, all the other kids at the far end of the apartment, sent for the doctor because doctors would make house calls in those days. And she was terrified that it was polio, that I would have it, that it would spread to the other children. So the second the polio vaccine was there, she didn't wait to have all of the trials, or as some people are about the COVID vaccine, to wait for the long-term effects to find out what they were. She'd seen the short-term effects growing up, and she had us all there instantly. And I would do the same thing if I had children now, and when the vaccine is approved for kids.
I have to say, most of my friends with children, they're lined right up as the vaccines have become, available for the right ages.
Yeah.
Their children are getting vaccinated, and they're still being very cautious because some of the variants, you can still get sick even vaccinated. So better to be safe than sorry. Now, was there anything special about being in Seattle that helped? I happen to love Seattle. I totally understand why you settled out there. I visit as frequently as I can. So I wondered if there was anything particularly special about Seattle that made it easier or more interesting, or.
Yes, Seattle, as you know, is a crunchy granola sort of city. It's very left. And as a result, right now, King County, which includes the city of Seattle, is 80% vaccinated among adults. That's very high. And so because of that, I think people here feel more confident going out to dinner, even indoors in a closed restaurant, which is what I'm doing tonight, and other things like that. So much depends on where you live and what the local political climate is like. But Karen, I really don't understand how masks and vaccines got to be so politicized. They're things that have to do with science and health should really be held separate from politics to the extent that it's possible. And
well, I completely agree. I mean, public health was part of my training. So to me, public health should take priority, because how are we going to deal with the loss of those 600,000 people? They were valuable to our society, and now we have to go on without them.
I read about epidemics a lot, and I read about them. I read memoirs of virus hunters who had worked on Ebola and on Lassa fever and on Hanta fever and on Legionnaire's disease and all of the other scourges that have hit the 20th century. And when you read what these people, how much they know and how well they can track this and how carefully they do track it, also AIDS from the 80s, that it's amazing that we developed a vaccine as fast as we did and as effectively as we did for COVID. And to not take advantage of that baffles me.
Well, and the reason we were able to do that was the last 30 years of research that had already happened that gave us the tools to be able to do that. Right. I have worked extensively with the animal RNA vaccines that were the baselines that were studied in order to produce the COVID vaccine. And I think it made a tremendous difference.
Yeah, in yesterday's Kin, a standalone novella that I wrote, actually that came out before the pandemic, but people are hunting frantically for a vaccine before a spore cloud hits. And they know what the spore cloud will do because we have had some helpful alien visitors that have showed us what it will do to human DNA. And they are frantically looking for the vaccine, and they have only 10 months. And I won't tell you whether or not they actually found it because I think you should go read the novella, Yesterday's Kid. But when the COVID struck, people were saying, oh God, how did you know? Well, of course I didn't know. I mean, you know, you write about these things because it's expected that they will come, not because you know. We've known, as you well know, that we were overdue for a pandemic. 20 years ago or 25 years ago, Laurie Garrett wrote a book called The Coming Pandemic, and it was even a little dated then. We knew this was going to happen. We just didn't know when and what form it would take.
Right. And we've already seen minor outbreaks of coronas, which mutated at a tremendously fast rate. So the chances, you know, with MERS and SARS, we already knew that corona was likely to be one of the trouble spots. And that's where they've been focusing research. So we actually lucked out that all that research had been done to help us to make that vaccine. But believe me, you know, the One Health movement in veterinary medicine, where we're combining veterinary and human medical expertise to be aware of these outbreaks, is going to protect us in the long run.
I just have tremendous regard for scientists. Actually, I'm a science groupie. I'm not trained in science, and that I write hard SF now has been a gradual thing, because I started, my first 3 novels were fantasy, and I don't like 2 of them anymore at all. But anyway, I've sort of gradually moved from fantasy to social science fiction to, if not hard SF, to high viscosity science fiction, and then eventually into hard SF. And as I've done so, my admiration for scientists and for science has only grown. I see scientists in a sort of a golden glow with halos, which I know very well on a human level is not true, but that's how it looks to me from the outside.
But that makes your books that much more believable, because you're putting that science in. You know, it's all well and good for some of the classics to do the hand wavy sort of thing and, you know, physics, and it makes it work. But I really appreciate the details of the science in your books. And yes, I did read Yesterday's Skin over the weekend. I've been reading your work for the last couple months, knowing this was coming up. So that one I did get a chance to read. And there were definitely a lot of corollaries in both human response to the way things were, as well as the scientist's frustration with having such a short time.
Yeah, again, I don't take credit, because we knew this was coming. We just didn't know when and in what form, but we knew it was coming.
I'm going to change this to a lighter subject. So this has been fascinating, and I could probably talk to you for an hour about science. But Susan Cohen, I don't know if you recognize the name, mentioned that you had swiped a baby to take to the dealer's room at a convention many years ago.
Swiped a baby? I kidnapped?
You kidnapped a baby to go to the dealer's room, and she wanted to remind you of that because that baby has recently become married. So this obviously was at a con quite some time ago.
I don't know where the time goes, Karen. I just don't know. Yesterday I was 17, and I just don't understand how this happened. And as for swiping babies, very likely, because I like babies, and I probably begged for the chance to hold this child. So yes, I'm sure that I did.
I am a huge fan of children and babies at conventions. I think it is a wonderful environment, and I wish I had discovered it sooner than college myself. And that leads me into the, I know you're very excited about coming to WorldCon, as we're very excited to have you. And you had mentioned on your website that you like going to conventions. And I wondered, what are your favorite conventions? Where do you like to meet people and do convention things?
In the bar.
Well, there you go, follow the typical author.
When I first went to conventions, when I was, and I didn't discover them till I was 30. I did not know that SIFO existed, that conventions existed, that the whole paraphernalia of science fiction fandom existed. I had no idea. And I'd already sold 3 stories. I just didn't know. And then somebody gave me a copy of Locus, and they used to do convention listings. And I looked at it, I thought, oh my God, there's stuff out there. And when I started going to conventions, I knew nobody, and I mean absolutely nobody. So I would wander around to panels just to hear my favorite authors talk. And I would not speak to hardly anybody, but I'd go to panels, I would go to readings just so that I could see my favorite writers. And then slowly I got to know people, and my interest shifted from going to panels, except for those that are hard SF or some other subject that really interests me, to being in the bar with all these wonderful people that I'm in. So yeah, for me right now, the best parts of conventions are in the bars, but I like doing panels too. I like interacting with fans. I like interacting on panels with my fellow writers, most of them. And I like conventions. I like the whole atmosphere.
Well, I have to agree with you on that.
Here's a story about when I first realized that this was my tribe of people. The old Boscone, and we're talking a long time ago now, 80s probably, used to be held in the Boston Sheraton, which has 2 towers, and there's a big central lobby that connects the 2 towers. I had been at a party in one of the towers, and I was going to my room, crossing the lobby and waiting at the elevator for the other tower at about 1 in the morning, because those were the days when I could stay up till 1 in the morning. Long gone, but I could then. And because the Boston Sheraton is near Logan Airport, a number of airlines keep suites there for their pilots and flight attendants that are doing overnight layovers. So I'm standing there waiting, and there come up 3 flight attendants and a pilot, all dragging their little suitcases and looking just incredibly tired. So we're standing there waiting for the elevator. And when the doors open, there are a bunch of guys dressed as barbarians, and they have long swords, long pikes and staffs, because this is before peace bonding, which they're pounding on the floor as they chant to Ra, the sun god, while over their shoulders are hung goatskin wine bags, presumably filled with something or other. And this is what greets everybody when the elevator doors open. And if it were choreographed, the pilot and flight attendants all take 1 step backwards, and I get on the elevator, and I realize I just made a choice. This is my tribe.
So you did. So you did. And I actually, my very first convention was Boscone.
Oh, was it? Do you remember the year?
In the 80s. It was the giant 4,500 in the brand new Marriott, Boscone.
So they moved from the Sheraton then.
They moved it from the Sheraton. The Marriott this was the biggest convention the Marriott had to date. It was brand spanking new. You could smell how new it was. And we had 11 people sharing in a hotel room from RPI, because my friends from RPI dragged me to this convention. And I never had so much fun in my life. It was my tribe, no question about it. Yeah. But I have been in the Boston Sheraton, because when we have World Cons in Boston, the Sheraton is one of the hotels that is included, because it's one of the biggest hotels. And
the first one I ever went to was in Boston. And again, I knew nobody. It was 1981, 81 or 82. And I knew absolutely nobody. But I just wandered around and did the things that I've told you. And I was astonished at how many, many, many people were there. I don't know what I'd expected. I guess I had no expectations. I signed up, threw my stuff in the car, drove there, and there it was.
And you had a good time, and that was the important part. Have you been to any other World Cons?
Oh yeah, a number of them. Not all of them. I didn't go to Con Zealand, for instance, the one in New Zealand, but we were in Ireland. My husband and I went to the one in Ireland, which was fun. I would say maybe since I started writing, I've made maybe half of the ones that have been.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Writing.
Most of my friends who are writers are writing in their hotel rooms in between panels they're on.
Oh, I don't do.
And try to keep if they're trying to get to too many conventions, they find it cuts into their writing time.
No, I can't do that. I want to socialize while I'm there. It's only what, 5 days maybe, and I don't want to miss all the chance to see everybody.
Well, that makes total sense to me. There is much a social event for me, so I tend to run masquerades, which is what I'll be doing. So hopefully I'll get to see you there. You'll come and enjoy our masquerade.
Because I teach writing all the time, I tell my students, well, not all the time, but I teach it on and off. And I tell my students, if you're really serious about this, you should check out science fiction conventions. If money is tight, at least find a local one near you. and get a flavor of this kind of thing. Interact with people, try to go to panels where there are editors and agents, try to get a feel for the business of this.
That's excellent advice and leads right into one of my questions, which I was fascinated to find out that you had written books on writing. How different was that for you than writing your fiction?
For 16 years, I was the fiction columnist for Writer's Digest magazine. Lawrence Block had done it for a long time, and then he got sick of it. So they asked me, and I had done some smaller articles for them. So I took that over, and for 16 years I did that until there was a change of editor, and she fired all the columnists, fiction, nonfiction, movies, poetry, and journals, because we were too expensive, apparently. And I don't think the magazine has done as well since, I gotta tell you. Anyway, because of those, where I was writing an article every month on some aspect of writing, when I came, Writer's Digest Books actually asked me to write the books based on my columns. So I had had that experience to do that. And I think I know the first one, at least, Beginnings, Middles, and Ends, is still in print. I'm not sure whether the other two are or not, but they've been in print a very long time.
They were all on Amazon when I went searching for books that you had written to get different ideas of what you've written. So, and my last question is, how different is it teaching hopeful writers versus fourth graders?
Oh,
I thought that would be a fun question.
Entirely different. Fourth or fifth grade is the last good year, in my opinion. You can still lead by affection. You can still get everybody enthusiastic about doing a salt flower map of the 13 colonies, or the Civil War battlefields, or whatever it is you want to do, a saltwater map of salt and flour and water. You remember those. After that, by sixth grade, they start to have to be cool. But fourth graders still don't have to be cool, or at least they didn't when I was doing it. And so it's a fun year. Adults are entirely different. And the more serious they are, of course, the more different it is. Every year I teach Taos Toolbox with Walter John Williams. It's a 2-week Clarion style, super intensive workshop that focuses on writing the novel. And this year it's in September. It's usually in June or July, but this year, because of the pandemic, it got postponed till September. And we have 17 or 18 students every year. And we work everybody incredibly hard, because these are serious people. They're paying serious money to be there. And we're in class, we have lectures, we have critiques, of course, on a Clarion type of way. We have homework, we critique each other's work, we have extra assignments. And every year, students arrive with hiking boots and plans to go visiting New Mexico on the weekend. And by the day 2, all of these plans are jettisoned, because we really push hard. But we've produced a lot of people that have gone on to publish. Fran Wilde was a student, Sarah Miller, Scott Hawkins, Alan Smale. A lot of our students have gone on to publish, and to publish well. And I'm not claiming that we claim credit for that, but teaching people like that is much different than making saltwater maps of the 13 original colonies. I find it very intensive too, and I go home just wrung out after the 2 weeks, because Walter and I are giving everything we have to give for those 2 weeks.
No, it sounds like a graduate level writing course, and as it should be.
It is. And in fact, because it was canceled last year because of the pandemic, and it didn't meet at all, when Walter said we would do it again, he's really the person that organizes it. When he said that we would be doing it again in September, he brought this up in, I guess, April or May. I said, Walter, but all those people that accepted, it's been 2 years. I mean, I'm sure they can't just come anyway, the ones we accepted, and rearrange their plans 2 years later. Well, of the 18, 15 said, yes, we're coming. And the other 3 spots we filled from the waiting list. So yes, people, they were very eager to do it.
I'm quite sure they were. It sounds like an excellent class. I look forward to your panels at Worldcon.
Oh, good. I hope they put me on the writing panels, because I haven't heard too much from programming yet.
Oh, well, they're working on it right now. I will make sure that Lisa, who is our wonderful program person for DisCon III, will contact you, and I'll poke her and say, hey, lots of writing panels, because that's what you want to do. And we are so glad to have you joining us in December. I'm glad you were able to make that work. Speaking of rearranging your schedule, because that was kind of.
I was thrilled to be asked. I was absolutely thrilled to be asked. And what we'll do is we'll fly to DC, and then from there we'll fly to Buffalo because it's so close to Christmas, and we'll just stay there for Christmas, and then fly back to Seattle afterwards.
Well, it's very convenient that your children are on the East Coast.
Timing isn't as bad as it seems. The only thing is we have to board the dog for 2 weeks, since I'm sure the hotels do not want our dog.
Yeah, we have the same situation with us.
Yeah.
So I hear you, but we will be very glad to have you. And I look forward to meeting you in person at DisCon from December. And if you need anything involving costuming, you know where to find me.
Okay. Well, thank you for the interview.
Thank you so much.